Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear us and see us. We'll be starting in just a second. Let me know if our audio is okay. It's balanced. One of us isn't louder than the other.
Are we doing? Sorry, my to-do hasn't refreshed. Is the financials the first thing?
If you put it on there, it should be. Give me a sense of look.
Oh, if you want to, I don't care.
Yeah, my financials is at the top. Yeah. I mean, I didn't pay attention to those, so I assume you know what's what.
Fine.
For all I know, Microsoft could be crashing and burning, like Meta. Let me do a mic test because I didn't do that yet. Tests. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I gotta do that too. So behind today.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Hope that works.
All right. And my dog will be squeaking for the entire podcast.
Wow, on time? Question mark. We're always on time. Rarely. I think today we're gonna be late, but rarely are we late.
All right. Tweets should be out.
Brilliant.
Get my voice recorder up. No, that's Jesus.
Did you just bring up voice access?
How did you know?
Because I do it every time.
That's so funny. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Amazing. This is 289 for the 28th. Let me close my door.
Your camera followed you.
Yeah. It's pretty funny that way.
Now you're really zoomed in again. Oh, that's annoying. Oh well.
It should probably fix itself, or I'll fix it in a second.
Don't worry about it.
Oh, we broadcasting at full HD today?
It turns out we are. We'll see if we can maintain that. So not something I can change now we're live.
Kind of live. So I can. You want me to bring out the framing a little bit?
Nah, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. Well, I just did. All right. I am now recording.
I'm now recording as well.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Windows Central podcast, episode 289 for October 28th, 2022. Hey everyone, Daniel Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central podcast. We got a big show for you this week. We'll be talking about, is the laptop market sinking, specifically related to Microsoft's financials. Their quarterly report was released this week, and so we'll kind of cover that and talk about where the market is going. Windows 11 news, as always. What would be this week without talking about Windows 11? So Zach will update us on what is new there. Also, the Surface Pro 9 5G and Laptop 5 is in my possession. We didn't get to review them yet just because Microsoft sent them kind of late, but I'll give you some initial thoughts, and I should have the reviews out next week, and we'll kind of go over that. But Zach also got the Volterra, aka the developer kit from Microsoft, which is also powered by ARM processors, and he's going to share his thoughts about that. Talk about really what the big news is, I think, this week, at least the stuff I'm really most interested in, which is Android 12L for Surface Duo is here. And it's pretty amazing and fantastic, and we'll go over that and our thoughts there, but that should kind of give you a hint. And we'll go over some more news as well. Zach, how are you doing on this pre-Halloween Friday?
I am not too bad. I've actually had a really interesting week playing with this Volterra thing, which we will get into later in the show. Yeah, I'm pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, it's been kind of a busy week,
Yeah.
and all my phones are going off, unfortunately. I'm trying to when they're put on do not disturb. So I'm getting a lot of distractions, and my dog is going crazy, of course. But yeah, busy week for hardware and kind of going over stuff. But a good week overall. We are getting ready for Halloween here, so that's pretty exciting, even though I don't do much for it. But I will be giving out candy,
I'm
not
surprised.
laced, not laced
Is
with fentanyl.
Halloween not your favorite holiday? Is it a
I do
holiday?
love Halloween. No, I love
Yeah.
the spirit of Halloween.
Yeah.
I never dress up for it. Like I don't
Oh.
enjoy that part. I know. But like, yeah, I love my neighborhood. Everybody's got the craziest like setups and like,
Yeah.
I mean, you got pumpkin, you got dead things, you got the fall. We have all the leaves. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. Yeah, but I don't do much for it. But that's fine. It's also a good excuse to eat candy, so
Yeah.
that's always a good thing to have. But I guess let's get to the big news this week, of course, which is well, we'll start with the financials for Microsoft. So the good news is
Boring.
sorry, they made $50.1 billion in revenue, which is pretty nice. Not too bad for that company. Although I think Apple made like 90 billion, but that's because Apple sells very expensive hardware. And they beat the street estimate, which was 49.7 billion. So as I've always talked about financials, when investors have an estimate and what they expect Microsoft to do based on previous reporting by Microsoft as well as the market, and then Microsoft comes in and goes, "Oh, we actually beat that number." That's always good for the stock market and the future of the company. And Microsoft has had a very good history of beating Wall Street estimates, which is very good. Although I did believe they did miss last quarter. The bad news is sort of the forecast, which is what's coming next quarter. And they're not unique here. Even Apple is reporting a downturn or expected downturn in revenue next quarter. Still supply chain issues. Consumer spending is also significantly dropping, as well as advertising. And this all has to do with what are called macroeconomic headwinds, aka we're dealing with inflation with the prospect of a recession coming on. This is affecting the global economy. And so consumers pull back on spending. Now, the numbers we're kind of interested in here, of course, is the more personal computing division at Microsoft. So there's the cloud stuff with Azure, which is continued to grow, but the growth has slowed there. That's a separate story. I don't really want to cover it. More personal computing covers Windows and it covers Surface. And so, interestingly enough, Surface and devices were up 2%, beating expectations. That is Microsoft's own expectations. Last quarter, they said they were expecting the devices to be down in single digits, so minus 4% drop. Instead, they came at 2% higher. So that's actually kind of interesting. My hunch is, we talked about this a couple months ago, that Microsoft does quite well with enterprise and selling Surface devices, and they might have seen a continue uptick there because although inflation and recession is potentially rearing its head, companies have a little bit more budget to play with versus consumers and pulling back spending. So that might have benefited them. Perhaps the big thing, though, was Windows OEM revenue dropped 15%.
Wow.
And what's interesting there is, so these are licenses that they sell to Lenovo, Dell, HP, blah, 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 all those companies to put them on their laptops. So that was down 15%. And that was worse than forecasted. And so that number, they had predicted high single digits a decline of.
Wow.
So they were expecting a decline, but they're expecting 8 or 9%, not 15%. So that's a pretty big miss. And that's counting 5 points of positive impact from the prior year Windows 11 revenue deferral. So I think it's actually a little bit worse than that number too. So what does this mean for laptops and the PC market? Obviously, there's a slowing down of people buying these. During the pandemic, it was a huge rise in laptops, people working from home. And none of this is necessarily unexpected. People are going to buy laptops, but they don't buy laptops every year. And so a lot of people needed new ones. They bought them and companies responded and made a ton of them. And Now the market is slowing back down because the market is kind of saturated. The PC market has always been kind of flat for the last number of years as smartphones, and for a while their tablets were sort of eating into that market share. But now, it's kind of going back down. That said, it's still going down, and the number is still higher for shipments, at least, than the pre-pandemic level. So it's not terrible. It's just kind of more returning to normal, what's expected. The good news is long term, that is maybe in 2 to 3 years, the expectation would be that companies and consumers will then want to upgrade their PC again, in which case, things will sort of continue at that pre-pandemic higher than average level. But this is an interesting thing, for Microsoft. I think that they have to contend with. Luckily, as a company, Windows OEM licenses surprisingly only makes up a very small percentage of their actual revenue. Cloud is obviously much bigger. And everything else basically saw an increase across the company. Office 365 or Microsoft 365, what it's now called, is continuing to do very well with consumers and enterprise. So all their services continue to grow. So the company's doing well, but things are slowing down and contracting a little bit. And I think the PC market's going to level out. And I don't think that's necessarily bad. Apple actually had a very good quarter. They beat expectations for Mac sales. I think there were people were predicting like around 9 or 10 billion, and they did 11 billion in sales. So they're doing quite well with the M1 processors. The question is always with Apple, one is how much of that is churn? That is people who are previously owners of Mac laptops who are finally upgrading. Mac users are pretty well known for sticking with their laptops for many years because they're good. It's good hardware, right? So people don't feel the need to necessarily upgrade. And there hasn't been that much change with the M1 to M2 lately for designs, but they're still doing well with churn there. There is some newer adoption. Back in April, Apple said that, they had 50% of the customers buying these devices were new users. And I think a large percentage of that was from China as well. So that's interesting. But that was back in April. They didn't say that same kind of number this time around. So we don't really know how much of these are internal upgrades. If you look at the actual, Statista and all the numbers say about market share, Mac OS is still, trending where it's always been trending. Because while they have done well and increased market share, the rest of the market has also grown, right? So Lenovo's been shipping more, and Dell's been shipping more, and HP's been shipping more. So relatively, the numbers have stayed pretty consistent, despite the fact that they're shipping more. So I think that's always important to consider because a lot of people want to then be like, oh my God, they did 11 billion. Everybody's switching from Windows to Apple. And that's, I don't think we can make that conclusion. And even if people are switching, the numbers are so in favor of Windows that even 50% new buyers of Macs would still just be a drop in the bucket compared to where the market is. That said, the M1 and M2 is doing very well for Apple, obviously. And I think they have a hit with their laptops. And this is the best portfolio they've had for Macs in many, many years. And so it's going to be up to the PC industry to respond. That said, I think laptops on Windows side have also been doing quite well and doing some really interesting things. But yeah, so that's it for, I think we'll cover for the financials for Microsoft there. But, it's an interesting thing to watch. But yeah, next quarter, expect more negative numbers for all these. We'll see, what Surface 2. They just announced, obviously, Surface Pro 9, Surface Laptop 5, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. I don't expect those to be driving huge numbers either for next quarter, both because the potential recession as well as inflation and pullback in consumer spending. Also, these devices aren't necessarily must-have new designs or something like that. That's going to really wow people to drop a lot of money. I should also point out, and I keep reminding people, that the average laptop that sells is like around $800. That's where the majority of people buy laptops at what price level. This is why, and this is the other thing with Apple. Apple's customer base is more affluent. Obviously, they can afford $2,000 computers, as well as maybe, but should I get that iPad Pro? But I want to also get the iPhone 14 Pro. And so they can afford a lot. Granted, Apple has a good trade-in program, but because they're more affluent, they're also tend to be more insulated against things like a recession, because rich people, I don't know if you know, tend to do pretty well, no matter how bad things get, unless they're just riding on Bitcoin. Uh, but if you're, a middle class person and working, almost paycheck to paycheck, you got to pull back on that spending. So that's also a difference in the customer base between Mac and Windows PC. And I think that's always important to consider as well.
Yeah.
So
Regarding the Windows OEM stuff as well,
yeah.
with Windows 11, the launch of Windows 11 really sort of locked out a majority of the PC market from being eligible
Right.
for the upgrade. So I'm assuming maybe this last year we've seen sort of the early adopters, the enthusiasts do those upgrades, and now the rest of the market who doesn't really care about Windows 11 is what's left. And I would argue that would be a majority, right? Because if we take a look at what Windows 11 required, it was essentially 8th gen Intel and up. So I'd argue maybe 40% of the PC market were sort of blocked from doing that upgrade. So come 2025, those PCs will be out of support with Windows, and maybe
Right.
then we'll see another sort of upgrade wave as people are told, as Microsoft does those warnings saying, hey, Windows is out of support, this PC needs to be upgraded. And who knows, at that point we'll be on Windows 12, maybe Windows 13 coming up. But that may be when we get the next wave of sort of PC shipments, because of the artificial air quotes requirements of Windows 11 and future versions of Windows.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. Yeah, so that's that. Let's go to, speaking of Windows 11, let's turn to Windows 11 news. There were some updates released this week, and I believe new features, including something with Phone Link and Samsung.
That's right. So yeah, we didn't do a podcast last week. So there was a build last week as well, which I'll quickly cover here. The main sort of takeaways from last week's build, which was 25227 in the dev channel, is they're exploring a handful of different sort of header UIs for the widgets panel. They've got a new header along the top, which has the widgets as well as news and whatever else. And then they have a version of that where it runs down the left side of the screen. It looks kind of nice. Again, these are experiments, so they haven't settled on one or the other yet. They're still getting feedback on it. But that's pretty cool. Moving on to this week's build 25231. This build is interesting. No real sort of notable improvements to the build itself, lots of minor fixes and stuff. But what they did announce with this build is that they are testing a new phone link feature, which allows you to instantly connect to your mobile phone's hotspot directly from the sort of Windows 11 widgets panel, similar to what you can do between an iPhone and a Mac. If you've sort of seen the Apple ecosystem, there's very good sort of integration between those devices, and features like that exist on that platform. That's not really been a thing for Windows until now. With Phone Link, you don't even need to open the Phone Link app. Just load up the Windows 11 Wi-Fi panel in the quick settings area, and you'll see your mobile phone, and you'll be able to connect to your mobile phone's hotspot straight through that panel, which is awesome. Unfortunately, it's only available to select Samsung devices. So if you're running One UI 4.1.1 and up, you will be eligible for this. If you're running a Surface Duo, you are left out in the cold for some reason. This kind of really annoys me that a lot of this stuff is still Samsung first, even though Microsoft has its own Surface Duo with its own software that it could very easily be integrating this sort of thing with at the same time. I'm guessing this is part of the Samsung partnership, where the agreement is Samsung gets access to things first, and so the Surface Duo gets sort of pushed to the side. But oh well, that's a shame. But yeah, that's the feature as a whole is really nice, and hopefully it comes to the Surface Duo very soon. And in other improvements, they're rolling out the updated system tray and whatnot to everybody, and all of that fancy stuff. But that's pretty much it for the builds, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, that Phone Link thing, Dan. I know you're a big fan of Phone Link. Do you find because I know you're a big fan of LTE PCs, so arguably this wouldn't really be useful to you. But when you are on an Intel PC, could you find yourself, a PC without a cellular? Would this be useful to you? Would you find yourself using this?
Possibly, at least in a pinch. Now, obviously, I test a lot of laptops, and which one is my favorite at the moment, or I'm using, does vary. That said, and the only reason I'm going to harp on this is because I'm finally finishing the review of this. It should be up hopefully Monday. The HP Dragonfly G3 is by far my favorite laptop that I've pretty much ever used. and that has 5G built in it. So I've been sticking with that one forever, and I'm going to probably continue to stick with it until something else comes along. That said, I think that this is a great idea to be if you're in a pinch, right? If I am using a laptop that doesn't have 5G built into it, I think this is a great option, and it's kind of a neat way just to flick it on. And yeah, this feature's been around on Mac OS, and I believe, Shane Craig said Chromebooks can do this too with Google. So obviously, Microsoft is trying to catch up with parity. Both Microsoft and we talked previously about Intel with their Unison app that's coming out. I've been really focusing on this idea of bringing the phone closer to the PC, and they're both working on it. I think that's a clever way. I don't know, Intel, as far as Unison goes, doesn't have this feature. Not that they can't do it; they obviously could, but I'm sure that they're going to be looking at this because, what we're seeing, what we saw from Unison is like a very stage one, right? It's going to be a limited rollout to be on a few devices coming out at the end of the year. And it has like the basic features of photo sharing and messaging and all this kind of stuff. But they do have long-term plans, including expanding it to other PCs. But I'm sure adding different functionality as well would be on that list. So I'd be curious to see how they respond to this. But yeah, I think it's a cool feature. It'd be nice if Duo gets it, obviously. Duo apparently is, very has a lot of ability. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about it too with the 12L stuff, the RDP or remote desktop feature that's on there. That's pretty impressive too. So I'm sure it can easily do this.
Yeah, I will say the phone link stuff is a big deal to Microsoft. Really, I think because earlier this year, if you remember, we talked about it. Microsoft sort of put together this Android org where Phone Link, SwiftKey, Duo OS, lots of Android projects went under one roof essentially. And the goal is to really turn Android into an extension of Windows PCs. And this is what we're seeing here with Phone Link and being able to connect to your mobile's hotspot through Windows interfaces. That's just the sort of surface level start of things. They have so many ambitions and goals and ideas for how they can start treating Android devices, not just the Duo, but any Android device that can download the Phone Link app as an extension of Windows. I think they even sort of see people in the future looking at Windows PCs and going, which one works best with my phone, rather than which one works best as a PC. And so Microsoft really is invested in this whole phone link experience. And things like, for example, one idea that I think they're toying with internally is browsing the web on your phone using Edge and then loading up your PC, and then a notification comes in saying, hey, you were just looking at this web page. Would you like to pick up where you left off? Click on that, loads up Edge on your desktop, and you're back at that web page. Or doing things with Teams. I actually think it's in the Android 12L update. I'm not too sure. I don't use Teams. But one other thing they were looking at was in Teams, for example, you'll be in a meeting on your desktop, and then you open up your phone, and then a notification pops up saying, hey, would you like to continue this meeting on your phone? You tap on the notification, and that transfers your position or whatever the meeting from your PC to your phone, and you pick up as if you're always doing that meeting on your phone. That's the sort of thing that they're looking at. And yeah, it's all stuff Apple is already doing with the iPhone and the Mac. Essentially, whatever Apple's doing in that department, Microsoft wants to try and achieve with Android and Windows. And I think that's a great thing, because those integrations, those sort of being able to treat both devices as one of the same thing essentially really adds to the user experience. It makes user satisfaction, all that stuff. It really just increases things there. And so I'm very excited to see where they take this phone link stuff. And I really just, the only criticism I have right now is that they need to start treating the Duo like a first party device, because they don't. They really don't. The phone link team seems to forget.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right with that. We saw that with the Xbox Game Pass too. I'm hoping that changes with whatever Surface Duo 3 is, where we are expecting more of an actual public push.
Yeah.
I've been saying for a while that Duo 1 and Duo 2 is what's called a soft launch. That is like why no one's heard of it, because they're not advertising or actively promoting it, except on like maybe Twitter once in a while. But hopefully that changes with Duo 3, and then we do start to see them take a more prominent lead with that, as you say. But
that Android org is super interesting, because I do think the plan is to sort of make more Android hardware as well, not just the Duo, but other stuff in the future, which I am digging for info on right now. So if you know anything, hit me up. That'd be great for my story that I'm working on. I know a lot of people are asking about the Duo 3. I promise I will get around to writing about it at some point. I'm still waiting for some details. There's still things that haven't been, air quotes, finalized internally yet, and I don't want to start telling people or start writing about things before things are set in stone, because that's how you be wrong at things in the long run.
Sure.
So I'm just sort of waiting until things sort of settle and are actually like greenlit for what they are before I start talking about things.
Nice. All right. I guess we'll go to Surface Pro 9 and Laptop 5 impressions.
Do you like them?
So they were sent to me. I got them Monday afternoon, and the embargo was Tuesday 9 a.m.
That sucks.
So it's not surprising I didn't try to review them in less than 24 hours. And I don't want to lament too much other publications who have quality reviewers and stuff, but not everybody. Obviously, a lot of sites didn't get them Monday afternoon. Some did. Some of them got them Friday. Some of them got them Thursday. I can just tell you there wasn't a lot of time, right? So you be the judge of that, how long someone spends with the device and the turnaround on the review. That said, it's not like these are super complicated devices that you do benchmarks, you do display analysis, and you do battery life, and you talk about the experience. It's not too hard, and you can kind of form opinions within I would say a couple of days. So Pro 9. So this is Microsoft divided up a little bit. We got the Surface Pro 9 5G, which means it's running SQ3, aka the ARM processor. We will probably be getting I've talked to Microsoft, and we'll be getting the Intel one later on if we really want it. And I'll probably will take a look at that one because I like Intel. I'm curious about the battery life with it. So first impressions. Well, I I'm surprisingly don't love it as much as I thought I would. But I need more time. I really haven't got to spend as much time as I wanted with it. The performance, some people have lamented. It's funny. The X13S by Lenovo, the ThinkPad, performs a little bit better. And I think there's two reasons. One, it actually clocks a little bit higher. Like, so on benchmarks, I saw Lenovo's laptop using the same processor actually get slightly better benchmarks. Not a world of difference, but it goes to tell you that whatever SQ3 they're calling it, it is literally just ACX Gen 3. They didn't add anything. They didn't clock it higher. They didn't do anything special to it. So, in fact, it's slightly slower, possibly due to the thermal restrictions. It's a smaller, tighter device versus whatever Lenovo did with theirs. The other thing is the Lenovo, and I've noticed this previously, it's only so you see a lot of ARM devices like the ThinkPad X13S is a full HD display. It's 16 by 10. So it's a nice aspect ratio. And it's a really nice display, too. I'm actually very happy with it. I have no issue with full HD on devices that are below 15 inches. But obviously, the Surface Pro 9 has a higher resolution display. It has a gorgeous display. But pushing more pixels does require more processor. And I think that's one reason why you see sort of people kind of complaining about the performance on the Pro 9 5G with ARM is, it is doing more. Battery life does seem good. Like I think it's going to deliver in that aspect. At least by comparison, right? It's definitely going to have better battery life than the Intel version, which I've talked about the Intel 12th gen. I love the performance of them. The batteries life tends not to be the star of the show with 12th gen. The beauty of 12th gen has been that it shrunk down the boards and they can do more. And as a result, a lot of companies are putting in slightly larger batteries to compensate. So if anything, you're getting similar battery life to the 11th gen, but only because the 12th gen has a larger battery. In that scenario, it works. But if you're doing a one-to-one swap, the 11th gen tends to do more, which makes sense. 12th gen, you're getting 10 cores versus 4, so it's a difference in performance. So the Pro 9 5G, and they didn't give us any 5G cards, but I've been dropping in my SIM and using it like that, and the reception seems fine. I haven't tried millimeter wave on Verizon because it's way too expensive. I think you have to get like an $80 a month plan to use their millimeter wave, which is absurd, especially since millimeter wave, like you have to be like near the towers to actually get those speeds. But it looks beautiful. The hardware is gorgeous, which leads me to believe the Intel version is going to be like a really nice one to use. Although I'm curious about the battery life on that Intel version. The camera is the star of the show on that device, and there's we talked about that when they were first announced, and I tried them, and that, my opinion, there hasn't changed. It's a really, really nice front-facing camera with some amazing technology in there. That's not, they didn't do it on the Intel version, but my Dragonfly G3, which I was just talking about, does do those things. So it's possible to do. And it actually performs a little better on the Intel version because it's got a beefier processor. And it can, what I mean is on the Pro 9, sometimes like the frame rate drops a little bit, like if you blur the background. And I saw this even on the ThinkPad X13S when you blur the background or do, I think the auto tracking, auto framing works a little bit better. But with blurring the background, you sort of notice the frame rate drops. It starts taxing the system a little bit, but I need more testing there. So, yeah, the Pro 9 5G, I'm like, so far I feel mixed on it. I don't feel as, and it's weird because I've been such a fan of the Pro X before that now I'm sort of, and I think it's because I don't review these in a vacuum, right? If this was the Pro 9 5G came out a year ago, 2 years ago, it'd be incredible. Don't forget the performance on it. It does beat the Surface Pro 8's i7 in some when you're doing ARM native. Like it's not a slacker of a processor. It's just when you're not running apps optimized for ARM, it's going to be not as performant. And so you see a lot of the reviews, people are like, when I ran Chrome, and that's, to be fair, I don't ever run Chrome. I stick to Edge. And so I, as a person who uses ARM laptops, I use ARM optimized things. Like people complaining about Spotify. Fair, right? If you go to the store and you download Spotify, yeah, it's the x86. But you can go download the beta version, which is ARM optimized and has been updated.
I will say that's, and we'll get to my thoughts on Volterra in a minute, but my week using Volterra as a sort of main desktop PC, that's the issue. The one sort of annoyance I've had as well is that it turns out there are a lot of developers who have versions for ARM, but they're not in the usual places. You have to go and seek them out.
Yeah.
Spotify is a good example of that. I downloaded Spotify from the store and it was slow and it was horrible. And I was like, I'm sure I read that they were testing an ARM version.
It's in a forum.
But it's in a forum. You've got to download an actual executable from Spotify's forum. And it's not automatically installed. It has to do its own updates. It's a horrible experience. And
because it's a beta. Yeah, so you're right. It's in a forum. You got to download the link, and then the version that installs. Then you have to go and figure out how to update it, which is not obvious because you have to go to find the about screen, which I had trouble finding because they have a very weird UI. And then it says the update, and then you can update it because there is newer versions that have come out. That said, the Spotify version for the ARM is amazing. Yep. It's super fast. Like it is instant responding and it runs beautifully. So that's sort of, and Volterra goes hand in hand with this, right? So I guess my feeling on this, if you, just like on all ARM devices, if you stick to ARM native apps, of which there are quite a few, and only occasionally use, like I use Elements by Adobe, which is not optimized for ARM, although you could use Photoshop and Lightroom, which are, but I run Elements on ARM, and I don't really have an issue with it. But if you're going to rely on something like Chrome, and this is on Google, right? So Google has had an ARM version of Chrome for a couple of years now. They just refuse to release it because that's what Google does. They don't want to cooperate with Microsoft here. And so they refuse to release it, even though they could, and the experience would be fantastic. But if you stick with Edge, it's really, really nice. And so that's the idea. If you stick with and people complain about Slack too, and that's true. But Slack's a garbage app.
Yeah.
But Slack on x86 isn't good. It's not fast at all. So it's not surprising that when you're emulating it on ARM, it too would be even worse. But so what do I do there? Because we do use Slack, and I use Slack every single day extensively. So how am I doing it? Well, I use Edge, and I go to slack.com, log in, and then I install it as a PWA. Just hit the icon at the top, install it, and I run that. And that runs way faster, and I've had no issues with it. And you can do this for so many apps. So if you're using Edge and you use PWAs, it's a great experience. But you're right. This is sort of the nuanced stuff. And then, but this is where Volterra comes in, which you'll talk about in a few minutes. That's the point of Volterra. And a lot of developers I saw did buy this thing. It's so they can develop and test their apps on ARM for relatively low cost. And the point of it is to drive ARM development in Windows. So these things go hand in hand. I think it's fair to say this is still, it's going to take a while. Don't forget, compared to Apple, Microsoft is not switching to ARM.
Right.
It would be a different story if they were. They're simply offering ARM as an alternative to x86. Apple forced everyone to go to ARM, said, we're done with x86. You should no longer develop for it. And that's a different story, which is why they were able to corral people into making ARM native apps so quickly. But with Windows, it's the drive isn't there, but they're trying to do as much as they can, and Volterra is part of that story. So that's my impressions of it. I'll have more. I got to do more benchmarks and spend more time with it this weekend, but I should have the review up. I'm hoping Wednesday, and then the laptop 5, maybe Friday if I can do it all that quickly. We'll see. Speaking of laptop 5, it's fine. Laptop 5 is even less to talk about, right? So
it's green now.
Yeah, it's green. I did get the green one. It has Thunderbolt 4, which, Thunderbolt 4 is one of those things that people are like, oh, it's got to have Thunderbolt 4. And you're like, why?
Yeah, and then they never use it.
I don't know, but obviously there are legit uses for Thunderbolt 4. I don't want to knock it. If you're running multiple displays or through a dock, it's really awesome. So nice to see there. But that comes part and parcel with Intel, right? If you're buying an Intel 12th gen, you get Thunderbolt 4. So no big deal there. Intel 12th gen, I love, like the cores, you really do feel the difference in performance. So this laptop feels very snappy and everything like that. Is the battery life going to hold up though? That I don't know. So that one I got to do a lot more tests. I haven't spent as much time with it as the Pro 9 5G. And I haven't even looked at the display analysis yet. Even the Pro 9 5G, I did a display analysis. The brightness is good. The color accuracy is better. It's not like outstanding though. It's not like 100% DCI P3. It's only like 82% or something like that, which is still below the standard. It does hit 100% sRGB though, which is nice. Audio is fantastic though on the Pro 9 and the 5G. Like, I mean, they just really knock it out of the park for there. So, yeah, in the laptop, still using a 720p camera, which is really unfortunate. That said, a Microsoft 720p is often way better than any other company's full HD. The exception, I would say, would be HP. HP is doing exceptionally well with its cameras. Dell, a little bit behind. Same thing with Lenovo. I don't know what else is to say about it, really. The green one it's fine. It looks nice. I would have preferred the Alcantara version, but obviously I'm in the minority there, and I'm not pushing the Alcantara, which is now just
with every new generation, one color loses Alcantara.
Yeah.
Now we're left with just silver.
yeah, because I have the it was the one I traded with Rich Wood from XDA with. I sent him a 15-inch, and he sent me the 13. And it's the blue one with Alcantara. Yeah. I absolutely love that.
That one is gone now.
I know, but yeah, like. I prefer like the Alcantara, like when I use that, it makes me want to use the laptop more. Now it's all metal, and because I wear watches, I'm just like, it's not as nice. So yeah, I'm in the minority though on that one. But yeah, we'll see what happens with laptop 5. But it's not as exciting as an update, right? And then there's really nothing to say about Studio, which we're not going to review because who cares? Yeah. So yeah, so I guess let's go. So those are my impressions. They're not amazing. So I don't feel as strongly, which is why I said I'm sticking with the Dragonfly. Like the Dragonfly has everything I want. It's got good battery life, the keyboard, everything about it is Dan, right? It's what I want in a laptop. And kudos to HP for doing that.
I think you would have liked the Pro 9 more if they sent you the blue Intel one. Blue Pro would have been awesome.
Of course, then it doesn't have 5G, right?
So it's true. Yeah.
It's just like.
But where are you going, Dan? You don't need 5G. You got Wi-Fi.
I mean, it's true. Like, do I absolutely need it? No. It's just really nice to have.
Yeah.
And I try to have a SIM that's active all the time so I can use it. Like when I went to Israel, it was awesome to do the eSIM because I was at events and stuff like that where either the Wi-Fi was poor or I didn't want to interact with people. So, like, I remember the first night we were at a party. It was like a reception with and it was like 60 people. I never met any of these people in my life. And it's just, I felt like I was in college again. Like, oh God, I'm at a party, So I had my laptop with me, but I had 5G. So I was just like, I'll actually do some work while I'm here. So I was having a beer and I was working. I was actually very happy.
As you can tell, Dan is a party animal at heart.
Yes. I at least I'm forced out of my element. Like if you talk to me at a party, I'll act normal.
Yeah.
It's just not my preferred environment. But yeah, so I do think the Pro 9 Intel version, I think it's going to be very performant. I think it's going to be a very powerful device. It's just whether the battery life is great and it doesn't have 5G. But they're adjusting the 5G stuff kind of with phone link. So who knows? Speaking of impressions, you did get Volterra, which does have a new name. So why don't you refresh people what Volterra is and what the new name is and why it's what you think about it?
So yeah, Microsoft officially launched Project Volterra on Monday. It sort of came out of nowhere. We were kind of expecting it around the same time as the new Surface is shipping. You know, I was hearing from sources that it might even be sort of announced alongside the devices at the event. That never ended up happening, though the timeline for things still ended up being the same. So Volterra was announced on Monday as the Windows Dev Kit 2023. That's its name. It's a really boring, terrible name, but it does what it's supposed to do for branding. It's supposed to tell you that this is not a PC for normal people. This is for developers who are looking to build apps or test apps rather on Windows, on an actual native Windows and ARM device, not in a VM, not in a cloud VM or whatever, or wherever, on an actual piece of kit with 32 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of NVMe SSD storage. Those are the specs. It has a Snapdragon 8cx Gen 3 system on a chip on the inside. It has a neural processing unit, and it costs $599, which I think I could speak for everyone here when I say that's quite cheap for what you get in the box. You know, remember, 32 gigs of RAM, fast NVMe storage, the flagship Qualcomm processor, all of that in there for $599. I think that's a pretty good deal. And I'm not a developer, even I picked one up because I thought that's a great deal. I'm going to buy one of those as well. So yes, it's shipping in 8 markets, which is way more markets than I thought it was going to ship in. When this was first announced, I was almost certain this was going to be a US only device. But nope, it's available in the US, the UK, Canada, Japan, I believe, Australia, France, and Germany. Was that 8? I don't know. I just sort of tried to remember them off the top of my head. But yes, that is where it's available, and I've got it here. My first impressions of this little kit. Now, again, I'm not a developer, and I'm not going to review this as a sort of end-user consumer device. That wouldn't be fair. Microsoft sells this as is. It's not intended for general purpose. Though you could really get away with it and do that if you wanted to. It's a very nice piece of kit. My first impressions of it as a device that has Windows and ARM on it haven't been incredibly positive. And it's not performance, although performance is a factor. I've just had issues with mine. I don't know if it's mine kit specifically. Other people have said theirs are fine, but I've had nothing but problems hooking this up to 2 monitors now. I've tried 2 different monitors, and they're both exhibiting the same issues. Those issues being, the Volterra doesn't seem to like HDR, and the only monitors I have around are HDR monitors. So even on the monitors where you can turn HDR off, the Volterra doesn't like them. It will display an image, but the contrasting between sort of colors that are of similar hues, just they merge together. So it's really hard to see between like boxes in the settings app, for example. And unfortunately, because of the ports on here, the ports aren't like super powerful. I think they're USB Gen 2 or Gen 1 on the side and back. And they've also got mini display. It won't output to a 4K monitor, and it won't allow me to enable HDR to sort of fix the HDR issues. So you'll flick the HDR option, and it'll flash, and nothing will change, and all the contrast is still off and broken and whatnot. This is the only device exhibiting those problems. I've connected it to a laptop studio. I've connected it to a Surface Pro 8, and those behave fine with HDR off and HDR on. It's just the Volterra having issues for me, which is a shame. And I've not been able to find anybody else who has a HDR monitor with a Volterra to test. I am in contact with a few people at Microsoft who are looking into this, so maybe they'll be able to figure out a fix. But yeah, that's sort of the first impression I had, was that it doesn't work for my monitor, and that makes me really sad. But I really do like the idea. It's a super sort of energy efficient little box. You know, it goes by default, it's set to go into sleep mode rather than hibernate, which is what most desktop PCs are set to do. So there's a little LED light in the front, and you just leave it for a little bit. It will just go to sleep like a tablet, and then you hit the power button on the side, and it wakes back up instantly, and you're logged in with Windows Hello if you have a Windows Hello webcam. And it's awesome. I really like it. It's super quiet. You can sometimes hear the fan if you're putting it under load, but for 90% of the time, if you're not pushing it, it's basically silent, which is to be expected. You know, this is an ARM device, and that fan in there is really only to help it sustain loads, so it doesn't throttle, which is handy for developers. It's made of plastic, ocean plastic, and it's only in one color, black, which, as you can see, picks up fingerprints like nobody's business. But yeah, I give the platform another year, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And I think this would be ready to be a consumer-based, like a real device. Because right now, again, it's a developer kit, so I don't think there's any warranty with it. Or if there is, it's a very limited warranty. Microsoft is basically isn't supporting it, although they are going to support it with firmware updates and fixes and whatnot. I just love the hardware. I think it feels nice. There's a little bit of weight to it. It feels very premium, even though it is made of plastic. It's very sleek. But yeah, it definitely needs, I think, more powerful, up-to-date ports. And it needs more than just mini display for for display ports. It needs full-size HDMI at least, and it needs more USB-C ports, I think. But for the developers, I think it's going to be. I think it's the only choice for you if you're a developer looking to build for ARM on Windows. This is $5.99. It's a great deal. I'm surprised you didn't pick one up, Dan.
Yeah, well, I'd rather spend money on other things.
Sure.
so, so I'm saying, even then, I don't think Windows apps for ARM can catch up to usable state, not even after 5 years from now. Like, I don't think you really. So that tells me, Harsh, that you've never used a Windows on ARM PC in your life, because I really feel like you don't know what you're talking about. There's a difference between, and people confuse this and conflate it all the time, which is they say the app is not compatible with ARM. And what they mean is it's not optimized for ARM.
Yeah.
There's rarely, the only things that aren't compatible with ARM these days tend to be video games, because they rely on so many sub-libraries that all need to be optimized. It's very difficult, where an app typically is more streamlined and is not as complex. That said, what's the solution? If you're buying the Surface Pro 9 5G for gaming, you're an idiot. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Well, no one's buying an M1 or an M2 Mac for gaming either, so there's no problems here.
Right. and if you do want a game, and I don't blame if you do, Microsoft has their solution, which is the cloud streaming. And that Xbox app has now been optimized and updated for ARM. So you can do that with an Xbox controller, and you can play something like Destiny 2 to your heart's desire on your Surface Pro 9, even with 5G connected up, right? So there are, and to be honest, that's the future of gaming on these kind of devices anyway. But there's a difference between optimized and compatible. I don't know of any apps, and I'm sure there are, maybe they're 20 years old or something like that, but I have never run into the apps I use that can't run on ARM. The question is, which ones are optimized for ARM? But even there, 50% of usage on a Windows laptop comes from the web browser. Yeah, that's what most people use the computer for. So again, that comes back to Chrome. The big issue you'll see is Chrome. And then Spotify, very popular. But we just said they're working on an ARM version. It's in beta. You can download it now. What about Photoshop and Lightroom? Well, those are pretty big apps. Those are ARM optimized, and they've been out for a while now as well. Okay, what else? Slack. Okay, yeah, Slack, but we just mentioned Slack is a cross-platform technology, and it runs poorly on x86. I don't know what you do there outside of brute force to make things, catch up. But you could do a PWA, which I admit is, they should put the PWA into the store, to be honest. They should really just get rid of that version in the store. I don't see what the advantage is to the store version, because I've run both. I'm on Slack every single day. I can't tell you what the store version, why it would be better. It's just slower and it uses more memory. So I don't know why they would just stick the PWA in the store anyway. So I'm not really sure, what core apps that people would use on the Surface Pro 9 aren't optimized. Like video editing, again, you shouldn't be buying a Pro 9 for video editing. You can, right? I mean, you can use, was it
Clipchamp? Yeah, Clipchamp does work, and I used it on the Volterra. It works really nice.
So there you go. And, because it's not dependent on x86 to run, because it's mostly kind of web-based. So, this idea, they don't have a ton to catch up on, at least for the demographic that they're going for, which is mobile workers, right? People who need to be on the go. But Office is optimized for ARM and runs beautifully. Okay, that's a core thing that people do on their devices and laptops. So there's not really a ton that's out there that doesn't run well. It's just that there's a couple things. I think if Chrome would come over, I think it would do a lot, but I think that's why Google doesn't release an ARM optimized.
Google has always tried to thwart Microsoft's attempts at anything at every opportunity, and this is one of them, not releasing any ARM versions of their apps for Windows, because it makes it cripples the platform. It makes things much slower than they need to be. And people won't switch browsers regardless. They'll blame the device. They'll blame everything before they blame the app.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally true. And that's the unfortunate. I would say Chrome is the biggest hurdle for
Yes.
ARM's success for people's experience with it, just because Edge, as good as it is, and people should be using it, in my opinion, you're right. People won't switch browsers.
Hmm.
They just get locked into something. And that's that. The other solution is actually something that's in the works too, right? In theory, we're just the Nuvia chips from Qualcomm. So we've talked about this before. These are
Yeah.
the people who developed Apple's A series ARM chips, which then evolved to the M series, now work for Qualcomm, the very same people. And so they're working on this next gen. The company was called Nuvia. What they're going to call the chip, we don't know. But these are going to be, they say they can beat Apple in terms of performance. Is that true? We don't know. Will we be hearing about them in the next 12 months? Absolutely. I can tell you, I'm pretty positive. So Qualcomm has their annual summit around November, December. I guarantee you next year, we'll be seeing Nubia, whatever it is, in action, and we'll know a lot more about it. And the solution there is it's going to be very powerful, and that's one way you can make up for emulation.
Yes.
Because again, it's not compatibility as in the sense that it doesn't run. The apps run. It's just the performance isn't optimized. Well, if you throw enough horsepower at it, guess what? It runs just fine. So this is a long-term project, and I still think ARM has its role here, but yeah, it's going to take a while before it gets to where it needs to be.
Hmm. I will mention before we move on from this topic, a few people have sort of taken this apart to take a look on the inside, and it turns out Volterra is essentially a Surface Pro 9.
For 9,
Yeah, it's the motherboard of a Surface Pro 9. I think paired with a Surface Dock 2 or parts of a Surface Dock, to sort of create the display out and whatnot. But I think it's really cool how this is essentially a mishmash of a bunch of different things, primarily a Surface Pro 9 5G, just without the customized SQ3 in place of it, just the sort of stock 8CX. At least I think that's the case. Maybe the chips are the same. I can't remember.
I think they're the same.
Maybe, yeah. But I think that's really cool how this is essentially just basically a Surface Pro 9 without 5G, based on ARM, and also without a screen and whatever else. And that's hilarious and awesome, I think.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
We talked about this with Surface Laptop. The 13 and 15 inch have the same batteries and same internals.
Yeah.
They do this to reduce costs because Surface, for what it is still very niche and small batch. They don't sell nearly as much, so they're not going to try to, as much as they use customized hardware, they want to limit as much as they can. So recycling and reusing designs makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to something more interesting, in my opinion, which is Android 12L.
Yes.
Finally dropped for Surface Duo 1 and Duo 2. Unless you're on AT&T, you have an AT&T Duo 1 generation. I guarantee you'll have it next week.
Yeah.
But AT&T is always a couple days behind. That's fine. Sorry. So this happens. I think, we knew about it was coming, obviously. You've talked extensively about it, and I saw it at the event just a couple weeks ago, and I had to convince people, I'm like, the fact that they let me play with it, unsupervised, it can do anything I want with it, tells me this is very late stage development. And they even told me, yeah, we're hosting internally, we're nearly ready. No firm date, of course, because they need to get approval, make sure that there are no final bugs. So it finally dropped, and I'll go first, and then I'll let Zach go first. I think it's absolutely amazing. And why is it? Sure, it's got new UI elements. Don't get me wrong. It's a new menus, and it's the settings looks more like Windows 11. There's more acrylic and blurring, so it looks a little bit closer to Windows 11 design. That's all fine. Like it, but it's the performance is just way better. Part of that's the animations, which you point out in your video, are just better and smoother. Zach's very picky when it comes to his animations. I'm pretty positive he's giving this one a thumbs up.
Yep.
And it's not just a Duo 2. The Duo 1, the Duo 1 is so good right now in terms of performance. And, shout out to Shane Craig, who just put out a video a couple hours ago talking about this. And I agree with him. I got the Duo 1 here running Android 12L, and it's just like I love
a new device.
It really is, and it's like the only thing that keeps me from using it. Well, it's not even the 5G. Who cares about 5G? It's in the camera. The camera is improved too, like in terms of usability and how it is. And a bright lit day, it's actually it's a fine camera. It does have NFC and some other little things here and there, but yeah, I'm almost and the bezel's a little bit thicker, and it's not a 90 hertz display, but other than that, because it's so thin still,
It's still
it's
so
just
futuristic.
yeah, it's absolutely crazy to use. And 12L, like kudos to Microsoft, and I don't think people appreciate this. They've only been doing Android devices for about 2 years now. And before Duo 1 came out, they had been working on it for about what, 6 months? Like they've made so much progress between the first Duo release and where they are today. It goes to tell me that they're serious about this. The support, a lot of people thought they were going to abandon Duo and just say, oh, we'll give it an update every 6 months. They've done a tremendous job. It's such a better experience, even on the original Duo, which you could pick up now for like $300. And I think people, if you have $300 and you want, your secondary device as a e-reader or a little tablet, I think doing this and putting 12L on it is absolutely amazing. And of course, the Duo 2 has been just great on it as well. So I think Microsoft deserves a ton of credit here for optimizing the operating system. It runs smoothly and beautiful considering it's got 2 screens. I've had no bugs or issues. There have been a couple. If you go to Reddit, there's been a couple bugs. Some people have lost like some of their icons at the top, but it turns out they just reboot it like once or twice. It comes back. So not a problem there. But Bluetooth seems to be better. Just a lot of the user experience seems to have improved. Shane has said that the low light performance of the camera has improved. I think other people have noted that as well. So, I mean, they've done just a tremendous job, which gets you really excited for whatever Duo 3 is going to be, because it seems like, they have this kind of down now, and their development for Android has just been darn right impressive. But Zach, what are your thoughts?
I think you've sort of nailed it. This is a really strong release for the Duo team. The Duo is finally at a point where it represents Surface in a positive light. I think when the Duo first launched, it was this sort of experiment that didn't land well with most people, and it was very buggy. And I think it sort of tarnished the Surface Duo brand quite a bit. But now at this point with Android 12L on here, it really does represent the best of Surface and the best of Windows, and at this point the best of Microsoft's Android. The UI is nice. It's with lots of blur effects, as I mentioned a few weeks back. We were expecting all of this. Even an early version of the Duo Connect feature, which I talked about, which was discovered by Shane Craig and a few other people, where if you connect the device to an external monitor with a keyboard and mouse and whatnot, it will boot up a remote desktop client, and you can connect to a Windows PC and use Windows as if you were running it on the Duo. Of course, it's not actually on the Duo. You are remote desktoping into another PC somewhere else. It could be in the cloud, it could be in a VM, wherever it is, but you were able to sort of initiate that experience through the Duo. That feature is not officially in the build yet. It's sort of half working. If you enable it through developer settings, you can get it to work, but it's not actually in it yet, I'm told. My sources say that the actual feature will be a lot more polished, and there'll be more to it than just connecting to a device and being done with it. The Duo itself is supposed to have a thing that comes up on the screens that will sort of allow you to control the VM, I think, and whatnot, or the remote desktop and stuff. So that's coming, but everything else, the pen menu, the UI, the gestures, the animations, it's all there. And it is great. It really is. Again, like I said earlier in the show, the only thing that we're really missing at this point is the commitment from the PhoneLink team to include the Duo with everything they do with the Samsung devices. It's not something they shouldn't be able to do. It's the same. Whatever partnership they have working with Samsung, it would be easy just to lean over to the guy who works on the Duo team next to them and go, hey, by the way, can we put this in the OS? And they can go, sure, let's do it. Why that isn't happening, I don't know, and it needs to be solved.
Yeah, they need. Yeah, it's the the alignment issue that they always have at Microsoft. And there's still Microsoft Launcher could still get a few more options.
Well, Launcher, I would argue, is the weakest point now from a software side in regards to Microsoft's efforts on the Duo, because Launcher is a stripped back version of the full version of Launcher. Microsoft
you can't even adjust the gestures.
No, you can't.
Which is
and that's
weird.
because the Surface team requested this. What you see on Launcher on Duo was deliberate. It was requested by the Surface team. They wanted it to be pared back. They wanted it to be simple. And I get the vision. I get the idea. But it's not cool to take customization away from customers these days. Even Apple is sort of getting on board with customizing phones and stuff on iPhone now. So I would like to see some of those customizability features return. Things like being able to edit icons or rename icons. Icon packs would be nice. Gestures, changing. That goddamn gesture where you swipe down and it pulls up search instead of the notification shade is the worst thing that has ever existed.
Yeah, I do that too on my devices. What Zach's talking about is to get the notification shade, you have to swipe from the bezel down on the display. to bring it up. And then if you just swipe down on the display, like in the middle of it, it brings up the search, which is fine. But a lot of people use it the opposite way. Or not the opposite way, but yeah, kind of the opposite way, I guess. Well, I use it where I swipe down in the middle of the screen, just brings up notification shade, and search. I'll have either swipe up or a two finger or from the top bezel. And yeah, when I was using the Pixel 7 for a little while, and I went back to the Duo 2, I got confused on that. It's like, oh wait. And same with the icons, the accent colors. Yeah, now we have more accent colors for once.
Still not enough for Jez.
yeah. Jez Gordon he actually really liked the Surface Duo 2, and he liked it with 12L, but he's literally not using it because he can't get the red accent color in dark mode.
Yes.
That's the only reason, which is, I think, the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But
well, look, some people are just so into their customizability. Like, that's how they wear their heart on their sleeve, by how they customize their phones. And if you take that away from them, then I assume they're not going to want to use the phone anymore. So that's pretty much what Jez did.
Yeah. Although, I mean, as someone who switches between Android phones from different companies...
I'm so done with customizing, because I switch between things so much that I just want to get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just got to go with the company's vision of what the device should be and just kind of embrace it, right? I tried using the Pixel 7 launcher, which is really nice, but they don't let me change the Google search bar. It's like embedded in the UI, and you can't take it out. So if I like using, Bing search or my own search, whatever. So, Google does this too, and obviously Apple is pretty restrictive. But I would love to see some added features to launcher. I don't know. This is such a popular complaint. I don't understand why they don't just they can even hide it, right? They could just literally have like a toggle switch for like advanced features, and you toggle that and it gives you more options, right? Otherwise default to whatever it is now. But performance on this, I mean, I was using the Pixel 7 for a while because I really like that phone. It's a good phone. But then when 12L came back to this, like, one of the most delightful things, Zach, and I know you pointed this out in your video, is the unlock animation.
Yeah.
Like, where it does this like burst of light, that kind of like, it's just so cool. And minimizing apps, the way they shrink down, like, it's just gorgeous looking. And so, yeah, I don't know. I've kind of really fallen in love with and then I put a new D brand skin on, which I did some reviews on the site for this glitch camo. I was like, no way I'm going to use that. And then I put it on, and I actually kind of really like it. It's absurd, but it's just so wild looking. And actually feels really nice. So,
this release makes me wish that Microsoft sold its version of Android to other OEMs, because I'd love to see this UI, because I like the UI. I've always said I hate Material U, the Google's design language for Android 12 and Android 13. I really don't like it. So I'm really glad Microsoft took this opportunity to implement its own design language, because I think this looks better than the stock version of Google's Android does. And I even think it looks better than Samsung's, to be honest with you.
Samsung, I mean... like, I like Samsung's hardware, don't get me wrong. I'm shipping back the Flip 3 to Google as my trade-in, and I took an extra day because I'm like, the Flip 3's hardware is just so nice. But their UI stuff is fine, but sometimes that's a little
better than
much.
TouchWiz was, but One UI is still not. Right. I think what they've done with the 12L Microsoft has is better. But yeah, I'd like to see that on other phones. Like, imagine Nothing Phone or OnePlus or Honor or whoever makes phones these days. Not many companies do anymore. But the ones that are left, could you imagine if Microsoft sold its version of Android to those? That would be really cool. And that would be an interesting business strategy for the Android org, who I assume are being tasked to make money. So what can they do? How about we turn our version of Android into a product for other phone makers who perhaps don't want to maintain their own version of Android anymore?
And to put it into a little perspective here, especially when it comes to the performance, when Jez went back to Surface Duo 2, he asked us, he's like, what processor is this running?
Yeah.
And we told him like Snapdragon 888, and he's like, because it feels faster than my Fold 3 does, and that's running the same processor. The performance is really impressive considering it's running two displays, and I don't think people appreciate that now, versus the review that they heard. But yeah, they did a good job with it. So
I will say that this sort of investment in the Android UI and whatnot is just the start. I think with Next Valley on the Windows side and whatever sort of Surface Duo or Surface Phone device launches around that similar time, I think we're going to see a lot closer integration on the UI front. I wouldn't even be surprised if the UI of Next Valley is something that they can very easily sort of bring to Android, almost one for one, because that's kind of the explorations they've been doing internally. That's the thought process they're going through right now. What UI can we build that works great across Windows and across foldable tablets on Android/phones? And so I think 2024, 2025 will be a very interesting time for Windows ecosystem, as well as the Surface phone line, whatever that may be at the time. And yeah, I'm super excited for all of this stuff. Like Android 12 just really sort of reignited my excitement for the Duo. Like, I'll be honest, like this device has been out for a year now. I get bored quite easily. I was like, I've been starting to look at other phones. That the new Xiaomi foldable looks really nice, and I was tempted to get one of those. But then Android 12L arrived, and I'm like, actually, I could probably hang on to this for maybe another year.
yeah. This is. I was thinking about that the other day. It's like, it's weird having a phone
for more than a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell you what, I will say that I don't mind if Microsoft moves to a 2-year cycle for Duo devices constantly. I kind of agree with a lot of people who these days who say, yearly updates for phones makes no sense. And I almost agree, but it can't be longer than 2 years. If Microsoft misses the boat next fall and there's no Duo next fall and they're sort of aiming for a 2024 timeframe again, or at this point, that would be bad. Because I'll tell you why. It's because it gives off the impression that Microsoft doesn't have a timeline, a schedule, a roadmap for this line, and people buying into a phone line kind of need to have the sort of I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. They need to know that there will be newer versions in the future. Otherwise, what's the point in buying into that line? You wouldn't buy an iPhone if you didn't think it was going to be updated again, right? If the Duo 2 ends up being the last Duo, why would anybody buy the Duo 2? Like they need to have, at the very least, 2-year cycle where they come out with a new one every 2 years. 1 year would be great for enthusiasts, but I personally would be happy with 2 years because it gives you time to move into the phone, settle in, and then in 2 years, and then the updates would be more meaningful because it won't be like every two generations are similar, and then the third generation is something new, and then the generation after that's the same, and then something new. Like every 2 years, you just have something new every time, and that would be more exciting, I think. But
it's funny you said the last Duo, and it was funny because there was a movie called The Last Duel that came out. Two things to point out. Someone's asking, does the Duo 1 not have lift to wake? That is correct. That's only correct, a Duo 2 feature, which is kind of funny too because I literally just turned it off.
Oh, have you also noticed? Oh, you turned off lift to wake on the Duo 2?
Yeah, I'm going to try it because I find I don't really use it.
It doesn't do anything if it's on. But I was going to mention, there's lots of little haptic sort of things that happen now. Like when you do lift to wake, there's a little bump. When you slide between the multitasking UI, there's sort of bumps that appear when you're switching between the apps and stuff. Like small quality of life improvements like that really go a long way, I think, and it makes the device feel more premium.
Yeah, I may go back to lift to wake. I'm just using it as an experiment. Someone's also saying, I want the floating dock we saw. So that's with Android 12L stock has a floating dock thing. It's on the Fold 4. Hard disagree. I absolutely do not want that. It doesn't make sense on the Duo.
I said it wasn't coming months ago, and nobody believed me.
I know. I don't know. I don't see. Again, this tells me maybe you're not using the Duo or you haven't tried the dock.
Yeah.
The dock is like, I think it's just corny for one, but it kind of makes sense on the Fold because it's a single display.
Right, exactly.
And so it's a way to launch apps because you can't get back. If say you want to split an app or run apps side by side, it's not easy to do because you can't bring up the home launcher thing while you're bringing up a second app. So they have this dock which you can put your 6 or whatever favorite apps into, which is weird because now you got to think about which apps do I use most frequently that I want in that dock. Because if it's not in that dock, you have to then go into another menu. So that's why it works on the Fold because they don't have an easy way to do. On the Duo, you don't have this issue because you launch one app on one side and on the other side you have the launcher on the other side, and it's just you just flick up and search or do whatever you need to. I don't see any benefit whatsoever to having this floating dock. Outside, it just looks like, I don't know, floating dock stuff just seems like this weird, corny 1990s Windows thing where you had stuff floating around the screens and stuff like that. Like, I think it's a kludge, it's a hack that they're doing to make multitasking better on a single screen device. But on a dual screen device, I literally do not see the benefit. I think it would just be ugly. And I think it goes against the experience that they're trying to go for, which is simplicity. That adds complexity, and now, like I said, thought. You have to think about which apps you want in that thing. And I don't know. I feel like a lot of times the app I want isn't the one I put in the launcher.
Yeah.
Like, it's a pain.
The taskbar on 12, the taskbar on any OS really is just a means for multitasking. And because, as you mentioned, there is that second screen on Duo, you already have that means for multitasking. You can't do more than 2 apps on Duo, so what would be the point in still having a means to multitask once you have 2 apps open? Just move one of them away. If you're going to have another app open, you're going to have to choose one to close anyway. Close it first, then open the second, the other app you want to open, and there you are. The Galaxy Fold with that single screen, it doesn't automatically do the multitasking. It's one app at a time, unless you physically force it to move into multitasking mode. And that's been my argument for the Duo the whole time. Multitasking on Duo is automatic versus on the Galaxy Fold and basically every other foldable where it's a manual process. And as a result of that, a lot of people don't actually multitask on devices like the Galaxy Fold because it's not something that's in their workflow. They don't remember to initiate that mode to begin multitasking. Clicking on a link in a browser on Galaxy Fold or in an app, won't move Twitter over to one side and then display your web browser on the other. It doesn't do that. On the Duo, it does. And that is where the Duo's benefit is, for now anyway. We'll see what they do with the Duo 3.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the benefit, and that's why the taskbar doesn't make sense on Duo. And it's also why you don't get taskbar on normal phones, on single screen phones, because the screens are just too small. You would lose too much real estate on the high vertical, and it just makes things more cramped. So
yeah, and I mean, I've already talked about the Fold 4. I'd bought it, used it for about 2 weeks, and returned it because I didn't really like the user experience. It just wasn't. I'm not saying it's bad. It just wasn't for me. It's obviously people really like the Fold 4 and the UI and what it does and everything. For me, I just couldn't deal with it. I just found it slowed me down, and I didn't like the interaction. But that's me. Someone's asking, considering where Duos are now, don't you think all 2-screen phones will still make sense instead of a folding phone? Personally, yeah, I think Zach would agree there, but it's a tougher decision than making sense, right? So I think ideally they would like to stick with the 2 screens, but one, is the market going to optimize apps for dual screens versus folding? It so far really hasn't seemed like they have been. That's one issue. The other is manufacturing. It's more expensive to do dual screens, especially at this caliber, versus getting something from LG or Samsung that is already being used in other devices, so it can reduce costs. And I think reducing costs is going to be a big deal for the success of a Duo 3.
The one thing I do know for a fact about the next Duo is the goal that they basically came at it from the perspective of, we need to decrease our bill of materials. How do we do that? And because the Duo 1 and Duo 2 were too expensive, and Microsoft's profit margin on them were very slim at retail. The fact that they were selling them for sale quite soon after launch tells me that they're not making much, if any, money on these devices at all. So with the Duo 3, the plan is to sort of decrease that bill of materials. You may not see that as an end user; it may still be $1,500, but as long as Microsoft can increase its own profit margin on that,
I'd be shocked.
I would be shocked too.
Ideally, they would like to go for that $999 price mark.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if they did a version that's like 128 gigs and 6 gigs of RAM. It's like that real, but the one you really want is like the $1,400 one, right? So I could see them doing that.
But the way they do that is to standardize on components. The displays on the Duo are the 2 most expensive parts of that device. The fact that it's because they're custom cut, they're custom sized, and there's 2 of them. So it's not just one. It would be one. It would be something else if it was just one.
And
screen.
The wiring.
But they've got 2 screens. Yep, you've got to feed those hair thin wires between their 2 hinges, and that's all going to be done at the factory, which is going to cost more. This device is so expensive, so they need to standardize on as many.
There's one person at the factory who just threads hair thin wires through the hinge.
Yeah, that's why they're out of stock. 'Cause it takes so long to make more, because it takes 48 hours just to feed those hairs through.
Right.
But so the plan for Duo 3 is to standardize on as many components as possible, and that includes the displays. So I'm hearing the Duo 3 display will be a more standard size rather than being these unique sort of 3x2 or 4x3 ratio screens that they are currently, which may be a shame for some. They'll certainly be thinner.
It's a trade-off, right?
Because narrower.
To credit to the Fold 4, way better to type on.
Sure, totally.
No argument there.
Yeah.
I enjoyed typing on it. And Samsung does a good keyboard. Where Duo 2, it's a challenge. I use the thumb keyboard. I turn swipe off. I don't like swipe, but a lot of people like swipe. And at least there are plenty of options on how you do the keyboard. But it's because it's so wide, even when in single screen mode, it's a bit of a challenge to, what's cool about SwiftKey, you can adjust everything, the size of the keys and spacing and all that kind of stuff. So, but you got to tinker with it. It takes a little while to figure out. But if they went to a more narrow phone, and this is actually the interesting thing with the Flip 3, which I had to send back. The Flip 3 is like very thin as a phone. I don't think people realize how thin it is. And it's narrow, and it feels great for typing on because of that, unless you're going to use it for an extended duration. Because then it's so thin and narrow, it actually made my hands kind of cramp up because of the way you have to hold it. Whereas when I use the Pixel 7, especially with a case on it, it's a little bit more beefier, it's definitely thicker. I don't have that issue. So it's a very challenging thing to get these ergonomics correct. And someone's pointing out that if Duo 3 is a single foldable screen, I can't see why they wouldn't use the same UI as Duo 2. It's just borderless Windows, right? And yeah, I mean, we've been saying that forever, that you can do a single screen foldable and still have the same software experience as the Duo 2's dual screens, because they just would be in the middle where the crease is. It would just be like an imaginary border, and the apps would still just launch on one side. There's no that's how it does now, and they could just do it on a single screen. So they could just literally keep everything the same. It just literally won't have a hinge in the middle, which solves a lot of problems. It solves the problem for Marquez Brownlee, who insists on watching a video spanned across two screens. It solves that issue. It doesn't have a delicate hinge. The downside, of course, is it's not going to be the glass screens that we have now, which I would use better for the pen. Now, you can do pen support, of course. The Fold 4 has it. So they can do that, but that's an engineering challenge, right? They got to make sure that if you're going to use the Surface Pen on it and extensively, that it's going to hold up. And when they're changing the display aspect ratio, that's actually going to impact using the pen. I would argue Duo 2 as is already a challenge of using the pen. It's way better than I think using the Fold 4 and any other device on the market. But it's a small device technically, but actually having a single screen would actually be better, because on the Duo 2, you have two separate screens, but you can only use one for taking notes. It's not bad. It's fine. Like I said, it's pretty wide. But if there was no hinge, it was just one giant screen, it actually would be better for inking. So I don't know. There's a lot of interesting trade-offs that you have to think about there.
Yeah, I would guess if the Duo 3 is single screen foldable, is by default it will be set to just open apps full screen, but you'll be able to just simply either set it to a mode where it does do side by side or by default, or you'll just be able to pick up the app and dock it to one side, and then it will show the home screen on the other side. Then you can open a second app from there, just like you can on current Duo. If you set an app on the Duo to span automatically, that's how it works already. You just pick up the app, move it to one side, and then you can open your app on the other screen. And I think that would be a nice compromise for a device like the Duo 3, assuming it's a single screen foldable, which it very well might be at this point. But yeah, I'm really interested to see where they go with this, because this effort they put into Android 12 only tells me that they are committed. They want to make mobile phones, whether that be a single screen foldable or dual screen phone, or even a standard sort of slab-based normal phone that doesn't fold. They seem to be here, and they seem to be wanting to deliver products of that caliber. So I think the next few years are going to be very interesting for the smartphone space as Microsoft sort of gets comfortable with it.
Shane mentions, they don't bring and replicate the dual screens and software, there will be almost no reason to buy it over the Fold or Pixel Notepad. And he's right.
Well, I don't know.
Well, the OS experience would be smoother and better, although we don't know how Google's,
Oh,
foldable
versus the
phone would
Pixel.
be.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I agree that they need to stick with the dual screen experience to sort of differentiate themselves on the market to have a reason. And I think it's a lot of the reason why people who use the duos love the duos is the fact why I went back to it after the Fold 4 is because I like dual screen experience and easily to multitask with two apps. I think that's the whole function of it. And we said this with the Fold 4. The Fold 4 is opposite, where you launch an app, it goes full screen automatically. That's the default behavior. And then you can like split the screen and run two apps or even three apps, but it takes a little bit of effort. Where on the Duo 2, because of the way it's laid out, you're always running two apps side by side. But if you want to run it as one single screen, quote unquote, you actually have to drag it to the center or set it to automatically do that. So it's literally the reverse in behavior. So I would hope that yeah, I'd be very it would be a double hit if they go to a single screen. I'd be like, okay, fine, I understand the realities of the market here, and I probably would enjoy it too. But if they do that and they get rid of the dual screen sort of experience and software, I'm going to be really kind of like, listen, I'll give it a fair shot, but I
Yeah.
agree, kind of takes away
Yeah.
the whole point of what they were arguing for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
if
go on.
if that behavior of clicking a link in Twitter and it not opening the browser next to it doesn't exist on a single screen Duo 3, then I think the concept is dead.
Yeah.
And this is no longer a Duo V3, it's a single screen foldable V1.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Uh, Someone's asking, they would lose the glance bar on a single screen. True, but they would lose a
You'd have,
lot too,
yeah.
because a single screen, you would need then an external display
Yeah,
of some sort
almost certainly.
to
I
use
know
it as a
a
phone.
few people were like, "Oh, I assume they're going to use that 360-degree hinge foldable screen thing."
Not yet.
No, that's
Yeah.
nowhere near ready. If the
That
Duo
would drive
3,
up.
yeah,
That would drive up
it would be
costs.
more expensive. If the Duo 3 is a single screen foldable, it will be a sort of Galaxy Fold or Huawei or Vivo X Fold style foldable. So it'd be an external cover screen with a 180-degree hinge that opens up into a soft foldable inner screen. Because that's the only way they can do it for a relatively affordable price these days.
Which is like so weird, right? Because
Yeah.
now it's like they have a large foldable and a second external display, right? So now they're just going right to the same form factor as everyone else. They got to now separate themselves based on screen size and aspect ratio, and of course the software experience, which is a challenge. You don't want to just be the same thing as the Fold is, because it was the point of going with Microsoft. So, yeah, it's going to be. They're in a tough position. They want to sell more, but they want to bring the cost down. They want to standardize. I don't know. They're going to have to make compromises. It's just whether or not they make the right choices. It's going to be kind of fun to watch. But we got another year to go, so
At least.
we'll be sticking with our Duo 2s for quite a long time. All right, news roundup. I guess we should report Joe Belfiore is leaving Microsoft after 32 years. Joe Belfiore was critical to Windows 10 and especially Windows Phone. He worked with Terry Myerson and is a big champion of Windows Phone back in the early days. He was always one on stage talking about it. He was always great to interact with. He was very enthusiastic. 32 years is a very long career at Microsoft. But, you get up that high in a company, make some good money, you can afford to take time off, which he's going to do with spend times with his kids. And, you can't blame someone having that luxury. You and I work from home, which if we had kids would be would be nice. I have pets though, and I love that aspect. So you can't blame someone for doing it. And I'm sure he'll think about what he wants to do, but he probably has a lot of options open. And he could even,
I think he can actually just retire if he wanted to.
So we wish the best to Joe. I've interacted with him many times over the years. He's a really nice dude who's been very enthusiastic about what Microsoft does, and he's just had a really impressive career there. So that was that. What else was there? Did you have any other news stories that we missed?
I don't think so. Give me a sec to look it up. Did anything happen? No, I don't think. I think honestly, like the Volterra stuff was really the biggest stuff this week. Yeah.
And it was confirmed that the Xbox streaming thing, the streaming bar, whatever that they'll come out with, is canceled.
Yes, Keystone. That's a good point. Yeah. So
yeah.
Phil Spencer did an interview with Wall Street Journal where they asked him about that Keystone device, which appeared on a shelf behind him in a recent interview. And he was like, yeah, that was a prototype we were looking into, but we've sort of gone back to the drawing board since. And the way he worded it is, at some point in the future, they will probably ship their own streaming hardware, but it's not currently an imminent sort of top of mind thing for them, which does sound like Keystone is cancelled. The alternative was that they partnered with Samsung, and you can now download a Game Pass app on Samsung TVs and play games through that way. And I'm sure that will eventually expand to other sort of TV brands, Sony, well, maybe not Sony, LG, and whoever else makes TVs, Philips maybe. But yeah, the Keystone little mini box, which would have been cool, it is probably not happening. And if they do come to market with their own hardware at some point, maybe it will be more than a box. Maybe it would be a handheld with a screen.
Yeah. So, and part of this is they're profitable with their gaming pass and the cloud gaming stuff, but their growth has slowed and they're not hitting their targets that they'd ideally like to hit. And again, it comes back to people pulling back on spending. Also, they think this console market, which is comparatively small to actual PC gaming, may have already been saturated. And so now they got to reach out to the PC gamers, which, takes a little bit more. People, they have their local games, and it's going to be a little bit more to convince them. You'll see things with, Razer's new handheld coming out early next year. Will help drive this, right? Because it's dedicated hardware. It's really nice hardware, by the way. It has a giant OLED display. It has their Xbox-like controller. There's the Verizon version, which has 5G. US only, of course, initially. Logitech also has its device right now on the market. So I think this stuff will start to drive the cloud streaming stuff, but it's still, ARM too, right? I was just talking about the Pro 9 and ARM, you can do that. So, but it's going to take a little bit while for that market to mature. And so I think they're right in pulling back on this. It's maybe a little bit too early. There was another story I want to cover here. Now I can't find it. Oh, here it is. Beyond the ThinkPad, how Lenovo is innovating with foldables and rollables. So Chong on our site did an interview with Lenovo talking about design that they're doing with foldables and rollout devices and how they sort of experiment with these kind of things. It's a really lengthy article that you should go check out because it's a really interesting thing. I think Lenovo, I've always talked about how they're one of the most interesting companies in the PC space, being one of the largest, but they also take the most risks. They're very comfortable with releasing basically experimental devices, sort of like Surface Duo. By the way, it's funny how Microsoft can release a device like the Surface Duo and Duo 2, catch flack for it not being a great experience. But Lenovo does this all the time and no one talks about it. Because like you and I both had the Halo keyboard, whatever that was called, remember? It was fine, but it was underpowered and, it had limitations. And of course, the first generation foldable, I didn't even get to review it because I didn't enjoy it very much. Like Lenovo does a lot of stuff and it's not great, but they learn from it and innovate and they get away with it for some reason. Whereas Microsoft, everybody's like, crucifies them for it. But go check that out. It's a really good interview. What else was there? Oh, some Edge stuff. Edge has been getting updated and getting new functions, which is always kind of nice. But I think, that's kind of it. We're probably missing something else in gaming.
Oh, OneNote.
OneNote.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's two OneNote stories.
Oh, is that?
So there's two OneNote stories.
Okay.
You go first.
I'll go first with mine then. Microsoft is starting the merger between its the OneNote for Windows 10 UWP app and the OneNote Win32 app, which is worse. Unfortunately, they've chosen the worst one to be the primary one going forward. So if you were a UWP OneNote user, that app is now not available in the store. I think you can still go and download it if you go searching on the web, and then there's a link to it. But if you look for it directly in the Microsoft Store, you'll only get the Win32 version now, which I hate.
And it'll be in your library.
Yeah, it'll be in your library. But I'm really struggling with this adjustment. I do not like the Win32 OneNote at all. I don't like how clunky it is. I don't like the UI. It's more complex. Just everything about it's just not as nice as the UWP app. And I'm really upset about this merger. I'm not a fan. But yeah, that's the OneNote story that I'm referring to.
On the pro side, the OneNote app that Zach was talking about, the one he doesn't like, did get a major feature this week, which is pen focused view,
Right.
aka it's just a full screen note taking
Something
option.
the Unity OneNote has always had. Oh, okay.
Yeah, though they said this is a better version of it, that
I
the
doubt it.
latency is much better. Well, they said the latency is improved on it, that
Okay.
they've done a lot of work on it. So, but if you have to be a Office Insider, which luckily is not hard to do. You just go into the Office app and we actually have a little tutorial on it. It just takes a few minutes, and you need to enroll into the I believe it's the beta, which gets frequently updated. Yeah, the beta build, and then it'll check for updates and install them, and yeah, then you can have it. It took me a couple times to launch it before I got it, but yeah, this is kind of cool because OneNote, historically has been associated more with typing notes, and there's always been inking, but it's not an inking first app. And they have like things like Whiteboard and Journal, which but those aren't note-taking apps either. Whiteboard's for collaboration, and Journal's, well, a personal journal type app. So it's nice to see OneNote have this ability. Plus, it functions, you can have it set as the default pen experience. And when you undock the pen, like on your Surface, and like say you click the eraser to launch OneNote, it'll go into this view automatically, which is really nice because I do like taking notes with OneNote, but the pen experience has always been kind of cramped because you have the sidebar and the part of the UI in the way. So you end up only getting about, I don't know, 70% of your display where you can actually ink on. Now you can you're going to get like 98%. So I think that's actually pretty nice. I'm pretty excited about that. Android 13 is one of the updates coming to Windows 11 for WSA. Interesting. I don't know what that's going to necessarily gain. Maybe performance will be better. I still don't use this at all. But,
Me neither.
although I did use it when I was on Michael Fisher's Spotify Live. I told you I used it for that. That was kind of fun. Yeah. Although Spotify Live is a terrible app, and that even slowed down my computer, which is a Core at the time was a Core i5 13th gen. It's a Core i9 now, but with plenty of RAM. And yeah, it was interesting. Should also mention, because we didn't do the podcast last week, that 1,000 people at Microsoft lost their jobs, which percentage-wise is a tiny percent. It's like less than 1%, as they point out, but that's still 1,000 people. And one of those was Casey Lemson, who I've known for many, many years. Also, she worked on Windows Phone and a lot of projects that people here will know of. And she was there for 20 years. Wow. And got laid off. And it was funny because she was on sabbatical for a while. She took time off for like about a year. Again, family, kids, and all that kind of stuff. And then she came back to Microsoft, which I thought was really cool. And she only came back about 9 months ago, I think. And I know she was working on some projects that she couldn't talk about publicly. And I guess there's part of this interesting thing with Microsoft where, hey, all the layoffs are democratized. It doesn't matter how long you've been here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I couldn't imagine being at a company for 20 years and just, oh, sorry, that, and a lot of times when they lay off people, they give them an opportunity to reapply to other divisions, other jobs. And sometimes that works, but they're already cutting back on, jobs. So it makes it kind of difficult to do. But, it's unfortunate. And, we're sorry for a lot of those people losing, especially now. It's not the economy is not fantastic. Although job growth seems to still be one of the things holding up. So I know there's a lot of talented people there, and hopefully they move on to find other jobs. But it's sad, like, between Casey Lemson and Joe Belfiore, and Terry Myerson a couple of years ago, and part of it's just been at this job so long that like a lot of these people I've met and known over the years, it's just like they're all moving on with life. I guess it happens.
Windows Phone is truly dead.
Yeah. But it's always kind of sad to hear this happening. So anything else we missed?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I guess we can go to thing of the week. Do you have a thing of the week?
Andor. I know it's been sort of going on for a bit now. Andor's
Don't
really
do spoilers. I
won't
catch
do
up.
spoils. I won't do spoils. But Andor's really good. It's I don't know how to describe it other than it's Star Wars, but you don't have to be a Star Wars fan to watch it. It's very sort of siloed, and yes, it exists within the Star Wars universe, and it sort of abides by what's ongoing at that time within Star Wars land. But if as long as you know very basic facts about Star Wars, I think you can get into the show. You know, the Empire, the bad guys. It's kind of all you really need to know. And maybe see if you've seen Rogue One, maybe you'll be a little bit more invested in the main character. But I don't even think you need to see Rogue One because that happens after all of this. And
Wait,
yeah,
they made a sequel already?
yeah, it's been great. It's a lot more political than most Star Wars shows. There's a nice balance of action as well as political, but there's certainly more political and talking scenes and people just walking down corridors saying things rather than people shooting guns at each other and exploding. Well, what's your camera doing?
I just didn't want it to follow me. I was opening
Sure,
my door.
yeah.
I can't want to come in.
But yeah, I think Andor's been great. I've been super enjoying it. And if you are looking for a show about, you know, a drama to watch, and even if you're not a fan of Star Wars, I think Andor is a great sort of watch.
Yeah, I think the way to put it is, you know, Empire Strikes Back and Rogue One are just good dramas.
Yeah.
And you don't need to be into the Star Wars universe to get into them. You can just watch them as a good sci-fi, not even sci-fi, right? Just, I mean, yeah, it happens in space, I guess, but they're just good dramas. And that's what this is. This is, you know, done by the guy who did some of the Bourne Identity movies. I think he did the last number 4, and he wrote the other ones. And so he has very much this idea of, you know, how to do, you know, slow pace, but also dense and complicated thrillers, basically. And that shows here, just a good drama. And yeah, it's also one of the least watched, apparently.
That doesn't surprise me.
But also the most critically praised, which, yeah, is
because
not too surprising.
I don't think this show is resonating as much with pure Star Wars fans as other Disney Plus shows like Mandalorian and whatever else they've done. Only because it's less on that sort of, oh, this is Star Wars, you know, let's just wear a jetpack and fly around and do all Star Warsy things. This is a lot more.
I find it way better than Mandalorian.
Yeah, well, it's very, like I said, it's a lot more talking. There's a lot more going on through words and sort of drama.
Plot.
And that. Yeah, exactly. A lot
Character
more
development.
Yeah, exactly. And you become invested. Whereas Mandalorian's like, let me just shoot everybody and can protect Baby Yoda, which is also fun. But you've got to be it's very much two different mindsets for each show. One show you just got to be like, I'm brain dead. Let me just watch this and enjoy it. And then this one's like, I want to pay attention. I want to understand what's going on. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's the adult Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I want more of this, right? I want more of that drama and the stuff that gets away from the Skywalker legacy and everything, because there's so many more stories. It's actually like, if you go into the expanded universe, there's like a lot of like almost horror elements, almost H.P. Lovecraftian characters that are like truly kind of like interesting, that would make really interesting like bad guy stories that they could veer more into like Star Wars horror, which hasn't been done. But that could easily be done. Speaking of, I guess I got 2 recommendations, both TV, of course. There's Cabinet of Curiosities on Netflix right now, which is, what's his name? Guillermo del Toro, I believe, the director. It's a series of, I think it's like 6 episodes, and they're all short stories, and they're all horror, and it's really good horror. Like, these are like stories that will kind of like stick with you for a long time. And I always saw the first 2, but I was just like, wow. It's like good stuff. I also watched a movie that came out in 2013, and I think I might have heard of it, but I never, that was it. And it stars Scarlett Johansson. It's on HBO Max now. It's called Under the Skin. And it too is described as an artsy sci-fi movie. It's very, it's slow paced, not action. There's no UFOs. But the concept is super fascinating. It's a really good exploration of like humans and empathy and what it's like and what it is to be a human, because the main character isn't. And so it reverses things in society and how people act. And it's just the ending is just crazy, and it has some visuals in it that will just stick with you forever. It was also very critically praised and bombed at the box office, and I saw it. I thought it was it's one of my favorite artsy sci-fi movies I've ever seen. It's up there with, I think, you know, Andrei Tarkovsky, who, if you ever seen Solaris, you know, that's a really good example. And he's done a few other movies where, same with the visuals, he relies on a lot of visuals to tell the story. There's not a lot of dialogue, but you can, and a lot of it's you have to figure it out yourself or interpret. And I think I don't know, it was just, I was very, very surprised by it and enjoyed it tremendously. And I think and it was crazy how they shot it. They shot it in Scotland, but the majority of the actors, except for Scarlett Johansson, of course, weren't actors. They were just normal people who they got to. They would film them, and then later they would go back and ask them to release, and some of them then went on to larger parts in there. And it was a commitment for a lot of these guys. And if you see the movie, you'll understand why I say that. But yeah, they're all like non-actors, and I thought it was just a wild way of. And they used a lot of hidden cameras to shoot things, and I think it was just a wild way to make a movie. So it's a very indie, low-budget kind of film. But I love that kind of sci-fi, right? The one that's not spaceships and lasers shooting all over, but the ones like Ex Machina, these kind of things. Stalker is the other Tarkovsky film. That's one of my favorites. It's kind of made. I forgot there's that video game that just had a sequel a couple years ago. Happens like in abandoned Russia, and I don't know. But the Stalker is an amazing film. That just like it's such a long, slow kind of process film that deals with this. It's a zone. They call it the zone. It's an area where, like, I think it was a meteor crash or something like that. And the zone now, like, people are supposed to stay out of it because like weird stuff happens there. But there are people who navigate people through it because there are these traps, and they navigate through it. And there's supposed to be this like kind of hidden thing in the center, and you never see anything. Like it's a weird sci-fi movie. But the ending, the last scene, just like blows your mind. It's just so cool. I don't know. He's one of my favorite directors ever. But if you like that kind of stuff, yeah, go check out Under the Skin, 2013. So there we go. All right, I guess we'll do Q&A now with the audience. That wraps it up for this podcast. Of course, if you're listening to this recorded, you don't get to hear this, but you can go to our YouTube channel at Windows Central and see our old video recordings there. You can also join us live every Friday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on that same channel. Follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, Rubino. Follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN. You can ask us questions there, harass us, or tell us you like the podcast or you hate it. That's whatever. It doesn't matter. It's Twitter. Twitter's going. We'll be interested also to see what happens with Twitter over the next couple of weeks. As we should talk about that. But yeah, as Elon Musk takes over. But I'll remain open-minded. We'll see what happens. Other than that, as always, thanks for listening. Take care, everyone.
Brilliant. So if you have any questions, now is the time to ask them. We will hang around for a bit and do our best to give you an answer if we have them.
On the Duo, I don't like keeping apps open in the background. Ryan, I'm sorry to say, Android is so optimized now for leaving apps running in the background. I'll just stop you there and say you should just get used to it. But he says, so I'm always swiping up and swiping to close. Have you noticed that doing this is much slower and clunkier after 12 hours? No. But I'm telling you, you're not improving performance at all on your device by doing that. In fact, I believe it's been written now a couple times that because you're doing that, launching a new app is going to take more time, and it doesn't really do much for memory management anymore. There's still this idea that, early Android, you had to do this to improve performance. I don't really notice that. I might do it every couple of days for the heck of it, or you can do one of those RAM booster apps that sometimes helps. I haven't really found an issue though with, dismissing. I don't know. Seems it was always you had to swipe down to the bottom, but it's like that on my Pixel too. Just the Pixel screen is taller, so I don't know. But because I think maybe you're talking about because the notifications are like larger now. But yeah.
Dan, Zach, could you see the Surface Neo becoming a Surface Qualcomm/ARM device? Not in its dual screen form. If the Surface Neo is to ever return, it will be a single screen foldable. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being an ARM-based thing of some kind. But no, not as a dual screen thing as announced.
The video game I was thinking of, thank you, Meat Ninja, was Metro. That is loosely based on Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky. Yeah.
Do you think the Surface Duo 2 pen cover will ever return? It's sold out everywhere. I have no idea about the...
I mean, it's right up there where the Duo 2 will return.
Yeah.
They said that, well, they said they haven't discontinued it, but clearly well, it does take, 48 hours, as Zach said, for a person to thread the wires through the hinge. So I imagine it takes a long time to make one. But yeah, I mean, we need to get the Duo 2 back in stock as well. So I think those things may coincide together. Last I checked a couple of days ago, even the Duo 2 still was not available on the Microsoft website. So hopefully that will happen. You still can get the bumpers, though, but it is hard to find some of these accessories. It's true.
What if in 2023 two options, Duo 3 Go would be a lesser specs but dual screen, and Duo 3 Pro with single screen but higher specs? It's a nice idea on paper, but as far as I'm aware, if Microsoft is moving to single screen foldable, that will be the commitment. That they will not do both dual screen and single screen foldable. It will be one or the other.
Someone saying, Javid, I'm getting better battery life with 12L, and I run a lot of apps in the background. Yeah, I think battery life has improved on 12L, too. I think I've noticed that as well. Some people have said that also with 5G. A lot of people turn 5G off because it affects battery life, but it seems to be better there. So, yeah, and it's one of those things because if you're noticing better battery life after the updates, there's also the honeymoon phase where you tend to be using the phone more because it's just cooler and you're exploring it. So if you're also noticing better battery life while doing that, that tells you that that's usually a pretty good sign. Because when you go back to your normal, over the honeymoon period, you won't be using the phone presumably as much. Yeah, Pedro says the same thing. Have you noticed that the battery life improvements after 12L? Yeah, like I said, I believe that is correct.
Also, will we get more frequent feature updates, or will we have to wait until Duo 3? I think we'll get a few feature drops here and there. I don't think there's a set schedule for them, but I have heard about a few features that they do have planned for the Duo for the next year, which will be before a Duo 3 for sure. So yeah, no, I think we'll get some new features here and there. It won't be every month.
Why do you think they switched around ports for Surface Pro 9 and removed headphone jack? I actually talked about that on the podcast 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and I'll put it in the review too. But the short answer is because the base model for Surface Pro 9 is actually the Pro 9 5G ARM version. So going off of that, they had to put all these antennas. I think there's like 11 of them that go around the frame, and they're every couple of millimeters or centimeters, and they had to spread them out for that, including there's 2 millimeter wave antennas as well. So that limited them where they could put the ports. And if you look at the Surface Pro X, it had the 2 Type-C ports also on that side. It has to do with the processor and the board layout. So all this stuff comes into play. So they did that for the 5G model, and they want to, as we were mentioning earlier, kind of recycle design stuff as much as they can. And so they brought that over for the Pro 9 Intel version. And so instead of making a special hardware version just for the Intel, we had to remove everything and change it all up. They just kept the ports on the same side as the 5G model. As far as the headphone jack, part of it goes into that design limitations. They can get a little bit more space back. It saves costs for them, which maybe they pass on to us. We don't know. You'd be surprised how big a headphone jack actually is in the device, and if they can use that for slightly better battery, or moving a component around, or adding 5G antennas, then they're going to do that. They also argued that people who buy Surface Pros are at a higher economic bracket and are usually basically on the cutting edge of technology, which I think is all true, and they're going to be very likely to own Bluetooth earbuds, which I think is also very true since they're so prevalent these days. Every company makes them. They're all over the place. And by the way, people are asking about what I'm using. These are the Bose Comfort Quiet 2s that just came out, and I absolutely adore them. The only headphones, I don't know what's going to dethrone these things. I use them at the gym. I use them for the podcast. I use them on the couch. I use them everywhere. So they're really good. But yeah, so that's the reason why. And I think that's true. It's a little controversial, but whatever. Zach, thanks. But which would you pick? Duo 3 Go or Duo Pro with both options on the market?
I would choose the flagship.
If
on the other hand, if both were flagships, I would choose the dual screen one personally. But I sadly, I don't think Microsoft's going to give us the option.
There's a longer delay after swiping up before you can close on 12L. I don't notice this at all.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't
I'm not
know.
sure what you're referring to.
Yeah, it feels exactly the same to me. So I don't know. I don't see any delays. By the way, that question about the ports and headphone jack, it was because I asked Microsoft that, so that wasn't me just pontificating.
I mean, if you're swiping up and hold, just works like normal, and swiping up to go home works like normal as well. I'm not too sure what you're referring to here.
Do you think Microsoft are readying their version of Android as on the Duo and the Android Xbox something in the hopes that antitrust will enable them to do more with mobile? I don't think antitrust has anything to do with this. I think Android is because the majority of phone users in the world use Android, and the majority of people who use laptops and PCs run Windows. And they would like to bring those two things closer together so that, because that's where the market's going. Chrome does it with Android, and Mac OS does it with iOS. So what's Microsoft's answer to that? So I think that's the reason why they're getting into Android. Also, they couldn't do their own operating system for mobile anymore because of the app situation. So, of all the laptops you have reviewed, what is your number one, the best you'd recommend to a casual gamer? Ooh, Sonic, puzzle, Resident Evil type games, but a big time app worker. I mean, well, Sarah, I mean, I did mention on the podcast, like one of my favorite laptops of all time is the HP Dragonfly, Elite Dragonfly G3. It's a very expensive laptop, but it has every cutting edge technology that's on the market right now in one laptop. That's a really good light. It weighs 2.2 pounds, which is less than 1 kilogram. It's absurdly light, which I really loved when I was traveling. I can get 5G in it, which I love. The screen, I only have a full HD one, and it's glossy, but you can get the anti-reflective one. So they offer that option. And if you're like Zach, who can't deal with full HD, they offer an OLED higher resolution, a 2K, 3K model. So you can get that, and you can get touch if you want to. So they give you every option you want. And the keyboard is good. It's got 4 speakers with discrete amps. And the trackpad, the touchpad is massive and just one of the best. It's really everything I love in a device. It's not a 360, and it doesn't do pen support. So that's a limitation. But I've just been, I've never, and the funny thing is when it came in, I didn't think I was going to use the ThinkPad X13s as my kind of primary laptop, but I was surprised when how much I've been using Dragonfly, and I just went back to it last night, and I was just like, damn, I really like this thing. But it has human presence detection to lock and unlock automatically when you show up. HP does this cool thing with the webcams. Only they do it. They have a dedicated key on the keyboard. You press that key, and a physical shutter behind the lens covers the camera. So you know your camera is absolutely blocked because it has like these white stripes on it. And then that LED lights up on the keyboard so you know which key it is. And they have one for the microphone, which does the same thing. So you get really good privacy protection. It has all the ports you can want. It has HDMI, 2 Type-C Thunderbolt 4s, and they do one on each side. Like, this is so critical. I don't think people appreciate this in design. A lot of laptops put the Type-Cs on one side. And depending on who you are, that matters, because you might want to use one for charging and one for a peripheral. But if they're all on one side, it limits where you can put the cables. But so you have one on each side, it gives you way better options. And not a lot of companies do this, but they did it here. Plus, you have, despite how thin and light it is, they squeezed in a Type A legacy port. It has a little drop jaw. That's how they squeeze it in. So it has and it has a headphone jack. So it literally does everything I want in a laptop. I think it's absolutely amazing. So that's one of the best. I also, Zach and I have talked about Surface Laptop Studio. I think is absolutely fantastic. I think that's also one of the best laptops I've ever used too. And I think Zach would agree there. Zach, do you agree there?
I agree. Sorry, my mic was muted.
Yeah, it's a really good one. So,
all right, last call for questions. Then it is time to head off. I just bought a £20 cable to see if this will fix my issues with Volterra. If it doesn't, I'm going to be annoyed.
This with PWAs, the app gap wouldn't be so big if Microsoft released a Windows Phone again. No,
PWAs still aren't there yet. They're good enough for PC use, but I don't think they're good enough for mobile use.
Yeah. And not everything is PWA or web-based. It's heading there, but
Yeah.
there'd still be limitations.
Instagram just did a big update to their PWA.
Yeah.
And
that's
pretty
true.
cool now.
Yeah.
All right. Is that probably it? Probably. All right. Thank you for tuning, everybody. We will be back next Friday, probably. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated on when we go live. But until then, we will see you next time. Bye.